Hello and welcome to Pursuit 365 Spirituality Show. I'm your host, Rani Sanghera, psychedelic guide and coach, yoga instructor, and holistic healer. Today, my next guest is Brittany Larson. She is a psychic medium and a transformational guide. Brittany, it is so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Let's begin by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, for starters, I'm Brittany, and I combine psychology and spirituality to help people work through emotional issues. So basically, for me, what I like to do is use like akashic records, past life regression, ancestral trauma healing, and DNA healing, all kinds of different types of modalities to help read trauma. And in the process of that, it's like the deepest type of shadow work you can do in a session. And it's just like looking at patterns and cycles that we go through in relationships and family connections, and also just in work and in general. So yeah, it's pretty much just, me loving the crap out of, what I do. And I just love reading energy. So I can't, I'm always doing it. I drive everyone insane around me because I'm like, did you know this? Like, yeah, it's great.
You mentioned Akashic Records. For our viewers, can you let them know what that is?
So the Akashic Records is basically, in layman terms, just a soul's library. And it's not just a soul's library, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the spiritual community would freak out by me saying it like that. But it is literally a library that's housing all of the different lifetimes that you've had. It's also housing all kinds of information on patterns, behavioral traits that you have, the DNA that you've carried in each lifetime, and also even ancestry. But it houses even more than just that. It also talks more about the universe and also different universes and energy. It just goes on and on. It's really awesome. And so the best way to describe it, most people equate it to like a library. So the best way is to just say it's a library, but basically it's a channel, it's a portal that you can open up and you can pull information out of it.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into mediumship. When did you sort of first discover that you had this gift?
Oh God, that's a story. So throughout my whole childhood, I have known that I've had abilities, and I've been able to see, hear, feel, smell, taste, and even have that sense of knowing. And it's been very crystal clear. But I also grew up in pretty much what you could equate as a cult. And so it felt very restricted and confined throughout my childhood. So I didn't really know how to navigate that. So I spent a lot of time inward, a lot of time traveling remotely to different places. So like at night when I was supposed to be sleeping, I was traveling to like Greece and, walking on beaches and having experiences with spirit guides. And, so my whole childhood is riddled with Native Americans specifically. And so as I got older, I had to go through quite a bit of, I guess you could say, shifts in my perspective, leaving, the religion and, going through a lot of different traumatic experiences kind of helped me hone into the fact that this is what I wanted to do. And even when I thought that this was what I wanted to do, I didn't realize it's not like I just woke up and I decided I'm going to read trauma. It's like it was all of these things kind of accumulated together that helped me step in to what I'm now doing. But getting there, it was like, oh, it's just been a roller coaster ride of adventures. And a lot of it started with me just wanting to heal myself and wanting to get myself off of the floor, because I've had a lot of emotional states that have made me feel hopeless. And I've had a lot of things that I faced that I didn't feel like I could actually overcome. And it wasn't until I would say, um, you know, I finally got to the point where I was on the floor, and I had been in therapy. I had been trying all these different group therapies. It was kind of really heavy. I mean, if I'm being really honest. And it wasn't until I was at that point that I was like, well, wait a second. I just learned about quantum leaping. And quantum leaping, if you haven't heard of it, it's basically like an extreme form of manifestation where you're like, literally like, this is my new reality. You set an intention with what kind of reality you want to create, and then you jump into that new reality, or you open up a door and you walk through, and it's very physical. And so I thought in my head, well, I just learned this quantum like leaping. What if I just walked into the reality where I wasn't hopeless? What would Brittany look like where she wasn't hopeless? And so I ended up getting up off the floor, and I, said, as soon as I get up off the floor, I'm no longer hopeless. I'm stepping into a reality where I'm safe, I'm content, I'm happy. And it just that little bit, it didn't take away the emotions, but that little bit completely changed my life. And the next thing I know, I have this guide in front of me who's like clapping their hands and they're so excited. They're like, "You've done it, you've done it. Keep going, keep going." And I'm just like, "What?" And so that's how I started learning, oh my God, like all of this stuff that are these different healing modalities I can use on my own mental health. And it sent me on this tailspin of empowerment. And then I couldn't stop talking about it. So I was like, "You guys have to try this. You guys try this. This is another healing modality. Try this." And so then the next thing you know, I built a following off of that. So rest is history.
What does a typical session look like with you?
Oh gosh, no session is ever the same. I have to even state that. But so all of my sessions are in a Zoom. So what it looks like is you come into the Zoom session, and I pull out a pen and paper, and I start recording immediately because I ramble a lot, and that's my way of channeling out the messages. And before the session, I call in past away loved ones, spirit guides, ancestors, and then I also call in my unique spirit guide team. I have some dead psychologists that I work with who taught me Aristotle philosophy. And so I just call in, those guides, and then I go into the session and I just like kind of step into the energy of that person. Like, what is it like to be them on a daily basis? What does it feel like to feel their energy, to witness their experiences, and what relationship patterns are coming up? What work issues are happening? And I look at, like, even from a psychic standpoint, looking into the future, there's so many timelines that can appear, and I look for the one where it's linked into the behavior pattern that you've already been doing, because you're not going to change your behavior, so you're going to end up doing the same thing over and over. So if I can see that timeline that's closest to that, then I can pinpoint, okay, look, you don't get your oil changed when, like when you should be getting your oil changed. Your car is going to break down and it's happening around this time. Or, like, look, you guys are not communicating right in your relationship. You guys are having some conflict that's coming up. That's going to result in this happening in the near future. And so let's change this energy, let's shift. And so my focus is really about finding strategies and ways to release and break cycles. And I'm very, 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 like, I'm very hands-on with this. I, like, even after the session, I send out homework, like even to people who are not even mentorship clients. I just want people to have as much tools and resources as they can to get to the next step. And I think that's really important. And even in the spiritual community, if I'm going to be honest here, like, in the spiritual community, one of the biggest issues I feel is that people say that they want to read trauma, or they can handle helping someone heal through trauma, but they're not trauma informed. So I feel like there's a fine line of making sure that these practitioners and different energy readers, they're not getting in too deep. And so I've spent a lot of time in my free time studying what I can about different psychology, techniques, and then also even emotional mastery classes, grief counseling, everything I can do to make sure that when I'm working with a client and I'm, reading that trauma, that I'm also taking into consideration what information is being passed along. And I cannot stress enough, anyone who's doing energy reading needs to make sure that they're really making sure they're trauma informed in that area, because it is a slippery slope.
Let's talk a little bit more about trauma, specifically intergenerational trauma. And what do you think makes you so good at this work when it comes to intergenerational trauma? And how do you read that?
So, the beauty of this, I'm still, if I'm being very honest, I'm still kind of discovering more about the types of abilities that I have. And recently, I would say in the last like year, I've been going through like this massive overhaul of a shift of what I've even understood for my family, and like what generational trauma looks like, that's passed down the line. And I've noticed the more that I'm dealing with that, the more that I'm attracting in clientele that has similar issues, so that I'm
Mhm.
reading that from them. And what it looks like when I'm seeing it, am not seeing it physically with my eyes. And I will just say this: clairvoyance. It's the ability to see. There's three different types of clairvoyance, which most people think there's like only seeing. And so most people don't realize how they really do see. The most common way of seeing is not actually the active clairvoyance where you're seeing a like physical energy in front of you. It's actually passive clairvoyance, which is appearing from the back of your third eye, which is it's all imagination. And so for me, like when I'm sitting there, I may be seeing energy in front of me and things like that. But when I'm looking, especially when we're talking about like ancestral realms and then even generational, I will see passed away loved ones like standing in a line going back from each generation. And I can follow one, I guess you could say, one of the soul wounds. Like there's these 5 soul wounds specifically that we can have in a given lifetime. And within that one given lifetime, you'll experience 4 of those soul wounds. And some of them you'll carry from each lifetime to each lifetime. And it's so fascinating how if I look at somebody and I'm like, oh my God, they're in their rejection wounds. People with rejection wounds, they are like withdrawn. Like they sometimes are in their avoidant attachment style, and they're also going to have avoidant types of behaviors. They're going to be more prone to disassociate from their body or from their environment. And so when I'm looking at somebody like that, I'm like, whoa, they've got rejection wounds. And as I'm looking at them, my left kidney represents dad energy. My right kidney represents mom energy. So I'll be looking at them and all of a sudden I'll get like a pain or like a gnawing sensation on one side of my kidney. And I'll know, oh, we're talking about dad's line. And so then I'm like, ooh, let me just call dad's line forward. And then I can see right down 7, 8 generations. Oh my God. So dad's mom was this way, dad's mom's was this way. And like, it's the women of the family, and it looks like it's coming from this. And I'll start talking more and more about the root of where that's coming from. And then we'll talk about ways to start breaking that cycle, even from like a practical stance. I'm not really into the woo woo, like I'm not like, oh, you got to do this ritual and this cord cutting ceremony, which is totally okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that I really feel I want to bridge that practical side. So to me, I'm like, what can we do on a daily basis that's breaking some of these cycles and patterns that we have? And then also, how can we be aware of it and slowly over time also shift out of that? And so I feel like a big thing with it, it just comes in different each time too. I mean, sometimes spirit will come in directly and say, this is a 7th generation, issue that's coming up, blah, 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 and they'll explain it. Other times it's literally, I'm seeing it. Other times I'm doing a meditative state with a client. And they usually come in, they're like, I want to do past life regression. I'm like, totally down. Let's do it. And we'll sit down. And sure enough, I'm like, ooh, this is not what's going to happen. And we'll be like going through the process to get into the meditative state. And then once they're in that meditative state, they'll see a cord, and they'll end up following the cord even back to like their mom, and then their mom's mom, and then their mom's mom's mom. Like, and it'll go back even further. And each one is giving them a message as well. So it flabbergasts me all the time, because honestly speaking, it's terrifying sometimes, if I'm being completely vulnerable and honest, because there's no rule book that I can sit down and go, oh, this is what my sessions will always be like. They're different each time, and they're unique. They're tailored to each client and what that client needs. So I've had to go to the depths of my soul and accept that I'm not necessarily going to have a rule book or some book that I can be guided in. And also, I've had to go through a lot of imposter syndrome through this, just to even get to this point where I'm like, cool, spirit, come on in. I surrender completely. Let's do this. Like, it's going to be different. I'm along for the ride.
How do you help clients find deep-rooted trauma, like trauma that they have just buried, may not even remember?
Ooh, you're talking about a client who's got a lot of resistance. It always floors me every time I get a client that comes in who's got walls up, that are like just massive wall, like, those Divergent, I don't like that movie Divergent, the series,
Yeah.
and the walls are like, that is some clients that come in and they want to heal, they want to grow, and some of them even want to be psychics or mediums, and I'm like looking at that and I'm like, that wall is like Divergent level, like what in the world? And it's been very humbling because these are the clients that need the most compassion and most patience.
Mm.
And so with that said, it's not necessarily about the right thing to say to that kind of client. It's more about the love that I can bring into it. And so with someone coming in and I know they have a lot of walls up, I'm gonna be a little bit more reassuring, and not, sometimes you got a backdoor psychology, some people, and so it's so not, saying words like we, what did we do for this, it seems like that seems to be a little bit more of the bridge that
Mm.
builds. And I have noticed with clients that want to have a deep rooted trauma, the more the deep rooted it is, the more that the wall is up. And so with them, I try different exercises, like, like compassion exercises. I do a lot more hands-on type things, more like, it's more of a conversation at that point. Instead of me telling them, like, what I'm picking up and reading, it's more like, let's talk about this. So what do you do for self-care? Let's talk about this, and it kind of leads down an opening in a rabbit hole. And I love those sessions so much, because spirit always, without fail, comes in at the right moment and says the most powerful thing.
Mhm.
And it's like, and then I just repeat what I heard and I say it and they're bawling. And so I had a common theme. Like, I used to work at a crystal shop, and they would call me the girl that takes your crazy away, because every person without fail would walk in and they'd have their makeup all done and their hair done right, and they'd come in and sit down, and we had this little, like, room that they'd sit in, and I'd give them a reading, and and they would leave with their hair all messed up and their makeup, like draining off their face, and they're like, crystal shop owner, what did you do? What was it that you? I said they needed to talk about their emotions. I don't know what to tell you. People just need to be validated. Like, I don't know. Like, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like seeing a soul is really the key component, and how you see a soul is going to be different for each soul.
Mm.
And I feel like doing poltergeist removal with a pastor really helped me kind of change my whole perspective and understanding of trauma, because it's not just this linear thing. Even from a human standpoint, there's souls that are in different realms that have different, like, experiences, and they draw relativity to that energy as well. So it's like seeing those types of energies, some energies that aren't even human, that you can validate, that you can support in different ways like that. It
Mm.
just changes everything. It changes how I look at everyone. And it changes how I look at myself too. It makes me want to cry even just talking about it, because it's just, God, like, that just makes it, there's so much love there that we can
Mm.
have for every soul.
Yeah, you can access that. What is quantum healing?
Whoa. That's a question that I've asked, like, literally, like, I don't feel like anybody knows what quantum healing is. Everybody asks that. Okay, so quantum healing is really an umbrella term. Like, if you were to Google it, it's referencing like pseudoscience. Don't ask me what pseudoscience is, because that's not really what I dabble in. Um, but it's also referencing psychology, psychic work, mediumship. Just like, it's an umbrella term. But I like to talk about quantum healing as being about our vortex, and it's using our own personal vortex to heal. And so that looks different for everybody. And so for me, I started hanging out with a Chinese medicine man for a while. And then I started hanging out with a quantum healer slash past life regression therapist slash psychic medium. And they changed their mentors. They changed my life completely, because then I started seeing how much our body is intertwined. Like, it's like our whole stomach is its own brain, and then our brain is its own brain. And so understanding that I can use all of that when I'm in a session. And so for me, I'm like, why would I ever just stop at mediumship or, I used to do tarot readings. Like, why would I ever just stop at tarot readings when I could do all of this stuff and like help someone beyond like one session? And it's like a Spartan kick, and you're either falling into your abyss of your awakening and you're growing up and healing some stuff, or you're going down a whole nother rabbit hole of healing that's ripping off the skin that you needed to rip off for a long time and you couldn't rip it off. So quantum healing is wonderful in that way of like really looking at somebody's vortex more than anything. It's not but it's not linear. So even describing it, I'm like, oh, did I describe it right?
So while you're having one of these sessions, how do you stay grounded? How do you not let it affect you? How do you keep that block up as well? Because it's very
So
easy for there to be an energetic transmission there as well.
mhm. So if I'm being completely vulnerable, again, I'm just trying here. At first, when I first started doing these sessions, they evolved. At first, it was just like basic, psychic mediumship sessions, which were just like not, to me, it was more surface. It wasn't like the trauma part. As it evolved into the trauma part and the emotional patterns and ancestral trauma, and then people started really opening up and sharing every aspect of their life. And at first, it was the most draining types of sessions I would do. And there was a side of the spiritual community that said, oh, well, if you're drained, you're not doing divine work. And I would sit back and I'd be like, oh my God, so there's something wrong with me. And I didn't realize that, number one, I was not drinking enough water and I was not working on my grounding techniques. And I also didn't have good close down and open up in the session where it was like, these rituals that I do that are like cleansing my energy. And I never thought about cleansing my energy before I even started the session. But it's like I was going to say it's fundamental and then I want to say something else. But it's fundamental to do that. Like you got to do it all. So I actually wash my hands physically before I go into a session. And that's me compartmentalizing myself, my issues, my personal things. And I'm stepping into the energy of this person. And I have very, very strict interpersonal boundaries with that. So that means that when I'm in a session, I am holding space and capacity for as long as that session is open with that particular person. We might talk about unaliving. That comes up a lot with clients. We might talk about things that they feel that they've done that they are going to make them go to hell, or they're going to make them, go through like a serious judgment. They may have also gotten in trouble with the law because they harmed a person and they've done their time, but now they're looking for some sort of alternative healing. And so I hear a lot of really, I guess you could say, awful things that most people probably can't hear. And also, in addition to that, I can see it. So sometimes it will play out in quick movie clips for me. However, I do ask spirit to present themselves with a lot of respect to me. So that would look like I'm not going to see the beheaded man, come in, and instead he's going to show me a portrait instead, and then he will tell me what happened to him. I'll even feel it. And so I can talk about that. But what I've loved is that the more like I've set the boundary and I've set the tone with my guides of what I can accept and what I can't, it's actually helped me absorb less. But then at the end of a session, I give it all back. And when I say that, I mean, like, I go wash my hands physically and I'm returning back any energy that I might have absorbed or taken on. I also close down those channels and the portals that I've opened that were specific to that person and their energy. And I thank all the guides and ancestors that came in with their energy and send them back, because at that point, I have to just step away. And I have my own personal care. I have my own trauma coach and different types of therapies that I'm in where I can go and chat with them in a safe space about, what I've experienced or what happened in a session. And I'm grateful. Even I have a best friend who's a medium, like a medical intuitive medium. And so her and I connect very well, so we can share, like notes and talk about like what happened or what came up. And it's very private, and to me, it's just a privilege. And I think it's a mindset to be in too, when you're in that mindset of, oh my God, this is a privilege to be able to sit and hold space for a soul on that kind of level. Like,
Mhm.
that's incredible to be able to do that. And so that in of itself is what leads me to this point where it's like, okay, I don't have to absorb it. But it's been a journey to learn to not absorb the energy of other people. And even to this day, there's still some challenges with that. And so cleansing rituals are just incredible. I love gongs. Just gosh, like my poor followers, I'm constantly, every time I go onto a live stream, I'm like, y'all need a gong right now. Jing, jing. Like I'll sing gong or pull out a Tibetan bowl or whatnot, because
Mhm.
sometimes we just need that boost of energy and like that shift.
Vibration. It resets the channels. You do strike me as an empath. I
Uh,
get that. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're a medium, so obviously that's gonna
Gosh,
it
I'm
goes
gonna
hand
tell
in
you,
hand.
right now, I don't like that term.
Oh no! Please
Well,
don't hate
and
me.
the reason being, because I feel like empath is number one, very overused. I feel like
Mhm.
what it indicates to me is unhealed energy. Somebody who is not does not have the right boundaries up. And I've talked about this a lot in different live streams and with other different practitioners about the need for, like, there's a lot of people that'll come in and say, I'm an empath. I heal people and I feel their emotions and I feel all this. And I'm like, I think everyone has the capacity to do that. I don't feel that everyone knows how to do that, and not everyone is born to do that. And I feel like we play different roles out, and I feel like empathically, um, we have the it's I feel like it's a frequency to be at where you can feel that energy, but we have to learn boundaries. And anyone who identifies with being an empath, they need they need
Yeah.
boundaries
Yeah.
desperately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so when it comes to receiving messages, have you ever received a message that you did not want to deliver or didn't know how to deliver?
I think the most so there's a couple of memories that come up just instantly when you ask that, because like the first thing that popped in my mind was every message needs to be delivered, and then the other part of me thought about the times that I've realized that a loved one was going to pass away, and I didn't know how to express that to a client. And I think there is an ethical code as a psychic medium where you get some information and not all of it should be divulged. And I remember sitting with a client and realizing that, her, parent was going to pass away soon. And she was reluctant to go see their parent. And it really, like, ooh, it got under my skin, because I was like, I wanted to say it. And so instead, I really guided my message towards, let's, focus on, like how we can bring the family together and do this stuff. And sure enough, she came back like probably a week before her parent was going to pass away. And I'll never forget this. She calls me up. She says, like, hey, I need an emergency session with you. I'm really upset. I just talked to another medium. They said that my parent has plenty of time left. And I said, cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I'll jump on the session. So I jump in the session with her, and I look at her, and she's like, I just need to know right now, is my parent dying soon? And I sat there and I was just like, oh, like, I was like, this is bad. This is bad. So I'm like sitting there thinking, okay, like 2 + 2 =. I'm like, it's late. This is too much. So I look at her and I said, like, you left the state. Yes, I left the state. I got on the plane. I went back home. I'm not going back. I had an argument. I'm not doing that, blah, blah, blah. I just need to know, do I need to go back? And I'm like, you need to go back tonight. And she looks at me, and I was just like, tonight. And she's like, my parents dying tomorrow? And I said, no, you need to go back tonight. That is what I'm going to say. And I said, I don't care what any other mediums say. I feel that every medium has a right and a wrong to everything that we see, what we believe, and there's subliminal messages and everything. But I'm like, I need to just say this, go back home.
Mm.
And she's like, okay. And so then it ended up turning into a conversation about how to have a conversation with a parent who's passing away. and it turned into this really awesome, powerful, empowering experience for her. She went home the next day, and her parent passed away within that week. And I still think about that session. It's been years, and I still think about that one session where it was that kind of impact, and having to kind of word it differently. And sometimes we get information from spirit, and it's wonderful information, and it's very on point. But there's times where there's a need to really think about your audience and think about whether or not
Mhm.
they can handle that, and then how to word that right,
Mhm.
in a way that's going to be respectful of their energy and also the other energy, because even passing away is sacred. It's like that whole it's death is symbolic. Obviously it's not the end of anything, but it's symbolic. It's the end of that particular, like, a lifetime for a
Mhm.
soul, and that experience alone, there's a whole transition process to that, and there's guides that show up for it. It's a party on the other side, and so seeing that and knowing that, there is a sense of privacy too for that particular soul, because you want it to unfold in the way that it needs to unfold for
Yeah,
them, and that's so important, so important. And I mean, I could think of a crap load of other ones that come up, but I feel like of all the ones, that is the one
that's the
that
one.
really hits. Yeah.
So let's talk about your transformational sort of healing. What is the most profound transformation that you've seen through your work for a client?
Um. So I've seen somebody come to me days before they were going to unalive themselves, and they went from substance abuse and everything like that to complete transformation within 6 months, to where they were doing hypnotherapy, like they're literally training to be a hypnotherapist.
Oh, wow.
I've seen whole families reunite, and come together, and actually everyone in the family go from skeptical to like, oh, we're gonna start working together and working as a team, and oh, let's do spirituality together and go into healing modalities. It's I've seen quite an array of different, so to pinpoint one specifically, but I would say I've seen a lot of results with a certain type of meditation that I do. I combined past life regression techniques, ancestral trauma healing techniques, DNA healing techniques, neurolinguistics programming techniques together. I don't like hypnotherapy, only because I just feel like the term, for some reason, it really makes people like lock up, and they're like, oh, I can't do it, or they want to do it, or they're too scared to do it, or they're resistant to it. So I try not to use that word, but a lot of what I do is similar to hypnotherapy. But combining these different techniques, I can pinpoint one emotion that is more predominant. Like, say we're talking about Martha, and she came in for a reading, and I'm talking to Martha, and I'm looking at her, and she has this whole wound of abandonment that's coming up, but really the feeling for her is loneliness. It's the big thing for her, and it's passed down from her dad to her dad's dad, and it's like this long generation. So then I'll sit there and I'll go, where do you feel loneliness in your body? She'll feel into her body. She'll pinpoint like her chest or whatever, and
Mhm.
I'll have her come up with a shape that represents that. We'll make it bigger and bigger and bigger. She'll walk through the shape into what I call a safety realm. Everybody in the world has their own version of safety, and it's a psychological thing and also an intuitive thing. Most people imagine grandma's backyard, they imagine forests, they imagine,
Sorry,
like,
I went into my grandma's backyard, and that's the very first thing that you said. Sorry, that just threw me right off there for a second. I was like picturing my grandma's backyard, and then you said it. I was
yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, so they'll imagine what they identify with safe in this
Hmm.
particular reality.
Yeah.
And so whatever that is for them, it's a beach or whatever, a boat, whatever it is. And I'll have them go in and feel it, immerse themselves in the feelings, and I'll get them fully immersed in that. And then I'll have them go find a door, just a random door somewhere, and I'll be like, you're making up this door. You're feeling that you're making up the door. They'll go walk over to the door, and I'll say something along the lines of like, hey, this door that you're about to walk through, you can always walk back out of. You're you're safe. Like, it's just like, my way of kind of like helping them get deeper into it. They open up the door and it usually leads directly into a memory from this lifetime that's linked to the loneliness that they feel. And from there, I can go anywhere. I could have them go to a past life. I could take them to when dad was really mean to them when they were 5 years old. And I could take them wherever I want to take them and they felt really lonely. And then I could have them have a conversation with dad intuitively in that memory and completely have them have a total like epiphany and a shift of their perspective of what they thought was trauma. And one of my best examples of this was a lady that came to me and she was wanting to leave her husband. She was done. She was like, I'm done with this relationship. I want to move on. And I looked at her first thing, literally not even 2 minutes in the session. I'm like, my God, her pattern is starting and stopping. Like, she gets started in something and then it gets too hard and she runs. I'm like, this is exhausting. It's exhausting to be her, that poor lady. And so I'm just like, man, it must be exhausting to be you. And she looked at me and she's like, it is. I can't stop thinking. And I'm like, I bet you start and stop. And so we talked about that. And I took her into a meditation. She regressed back to her 5-year-old self in the back of a car. And she saw her parents arguing at the gas station. And I had her as her adult self go talk to her 5-year-old self in the car. And she was feeling lonely and she was feeling all of the stuff come up. And so I had her do some inner child work right there, and after doing that, I had her get out of the car and go up to her mom. And I had her pause the memory right there. So dad's just going to stand there and just be like, oh,
Yeah.
And so I had her go talk to her mom. And what came up was her mom was feeling lonely and her dad was feeling doubt. And so when anytime she feels those feelings in a relationship, she's immediately ready to be aggressive or like and start arguments and then also self-sabotage whatever is happening. So it was so fascinating because I didn't say anything. I just was like, oh, I'm picking this up. Okay, I'm going to write this down. I'm picking this up. And I'm just going with it. And I'm guiding her to have this conversation with her mom. And she just starts bawling. And she's like, you mean to tell me this whole time I've been holding this feeling of doubt and loneliness that has nothing to do with me? And it led down this rabbit hole of giving back shame to her parents. And then we cleared out that memory. And it's like it completely transformed her marriage. She went back to her partner and they are still together to this day. And I still get emails, like updates and everything. And I'm like, that's really great, but yeah, so it's an adventure, and this type of work is, oh my gosh, these meditations are just fascinating. And they're all, I have to say this, not one of them are something where I have like a guidebook for them. I have my guides come in and guide me in a meditation for somebody. So everything is very, it can go in any direction. Sometimes we'll do what's called inner life regression, which is in between lifetimes. So you talk to your divine counsel, basically the masters that helped you set up your life for this experience. And you can ask any questions about like your body and like why you're here and like what resonates with you, what makes sense. And it's incredible. Just absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears here. That was a lot of information, but I want to let our viewers know that you do offer readings and sessions online. And I believe you have a mediumship program. Are you still doing that?
So I have a mentorship program.
Mentorship. Sorry, mentorship.
Yeah. So psychic and mediumship development, as well as emotional mastery. And I got to stress, I am really interested in emotional mastery. So I will make sure that you get it. Like, okay, yeah.
That's amazing. Anything else you want to share with our viewers before we wrap it up today?
Well, if you are new to the energy world, remember that everything is always love. And if you have been in the energy world a long time and you've done practitioner work, holistic healing, things like that, remember that There's new generations coming in who are already out the gate, very evolved, and we're all here. Age does not matter. And so we're all here learning from one another. And there's always a new perspective to any given situation, and you're never alone. So,
Well,
yeah.
thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me.
And to our viewers, we will post all of Brittany's links in the bio, and we will see you in the next episode.